Hi, everyone. We are here with Save Our Schools Arizona, our emergency town hall. We have an amazing panel tonight. We've got Senator Stephanie Hamilton from LD10 in Tucson, Dr. Gabriel Trujillo, superintendent of TUSD. Let's see, we've got Burdetta Hodge, who is on the Tempe Union School Board, Patrick Brown, who's an educator and parent in South Phoenix, and Raquel Mamani, who is an educator and parent in Phoenix, joining us today. Thank you so much, everyone who is watching. And we will make sure to put this video up on YouTube and also on our Facebook, so folks who couldn't be live with us could attend or could watch in the future as well. I'm going to go over just some very basic information before we hear from this amazing panel of experts. So right now we have an Arizona state legislature that is hostile to public education. And, you know, it's interesting this year because this legislature does need to appease voters. It is an election year. So these lawmakers are sitting on a $5.3 billion surplus. They have a real opportunity to truly fund our public schools and make good on those election year promises. But currently, the focus of our negotiations at the legislature is this myopic push for private school vouchers, which you can remember voters overwhelmingly rejected in 2018 with Proposition 305. So budget negotiations have begun. They're underway. Republican leadership has struck a budget deal with the governor's office, it sounds like, and now Republican leaders in the House and Senate are attempting to sell this deal to their caucus. What the budget spreadsheets that have been leaked show is a $15.1 billion spending plan for the next fiscal year, a $1.3 billion tax cut over 3 years for the wealthy, a $1 billion allocated for water over the next 3 years, $1 billion for road projects, $425 million, which is a massive deposit in the state's rainy day fund, which has already ballooned over the last few years, leading many to argue that we are in a rainy day, considering that we are last in the nation in education funding and have been through a worldwide pandemic. For the K-12 budget pieces, right now, the top line for K-12 is billed at $474 million in increased funding, but that includes 2% for inflation, which is required by law, the absolute bare minimum for inflation. Many other government services are getting much more. Also a 2.5 base increase, as well as additional funding for special education, which is fabulous, $100 million proposed. Increases in district additional assistance and charter additional assistance, as well as some minor one-time funding for building renewal, not nearly enough to satisfy the lawsuit that's currently underway in the courts against the state for not fulfilling its obligations for school facilities. All right, and then of course we have Groundhog Day voucher expansions. The current proposal that's being discussed is universal voucher expansion. So this is Prop 305 on steroids. It is worse because it's universal, but it also has no cap, meaning that these vouchers can balloon until every single child on the state is in a private school and on a voucher. We're also reading in the budget spreadsheets a $27 million increase in STO vouchers, which have zero accountability, and the vast majority of them go to religious parochial schools. And that is $27 million over 3 years. I pulled together this graph very quickly for folks just to see that this is a huge problem. We're already spending over $400 million a year on private school vouchers in this state. You can see over the last 20 years, that has gone from a very modest program, which was what was promised by the legislature, to this massive funding drain from public schools. All right, and then the last piece from me that I want to explain is that the largest line item related to K-12 in the budget proposal right now doesn't actually appear to be an expenditure at all, but is a tax cut. there is a proposal to cut $330 million in equalization funding through the equalization formula. What that would mean is fewer property taxes, which would mean that the state would have to pick up the tab for those $330 million, which if the state doesn't, they would have to make up, the districts would have to make up. And what this means is the districts with the lowest property, taxes, the lowest property values would suffer the most, as in our poorest and most rural schools. Lawmakers are also in these budget docs threatening elimination of the teacher experience index, which allows districts to incentivize experienced teachers to stay on and continue in the profession and in their district. They're also threatening to eliminate additional teacher compensation funds for districts. So that's the budget in a nutshell. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing all of this horrible news and come to our amazing panel, because that's who you all came to see. So I'm going to ask a question first of Senator Hamilton. Hi, Senator Hamilton. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
I'm going to spotlight you so everybody can see you. There we go. Hi. All right. So the Arizona legislature, you're there every day, remains very focused on expanding these private school vouchers and is holding hundreds of millions of dollars of K-12 funding hostage in an effort to expand them. So can you tell us a little bit about your perspective of what's happening down there, ESA voucher expansion? Just give us the lay of the land.
Well, I wish that there was a lot to say from my end, and the reason I'm lamenting that is we've been told, oh my goodness, so we're at day 150 of the legislative session, and typically the legislature tries to end as close to day 100 as possible. So like last session, we are, it would appear, going the distance and pushing the bounds of when there'll need to be a government shutdown if we don't produce, I say we, if a budget is not produced. When we were done with committees, and this was after crossover week, so after we were done at bills that had transferred chambers, and we're vetting those through committee and taking those to the floor for third votes and final votes, we were told quite honestly and clearly, so this was towards the middle of April, we were told quite bluntly that there should be no need for the Democrats to be a part of the budget process, that they on their own, the colleagues across the aisle, could produce a Republican budget with no need for Democratic input or votes. And if any negotiation happened during the budget process, that we couldn't trust it, because the moment they got all of the Republicans on board, they would renege on any negotiated terms and agreements, which is, it's maddening, because when you look at the makeup of each chamber, we're a 31-29 split. We are a 16-14 split. So almost half of each chamber doesn't get a voice in the budget. This is not fair representation for this state of Arizona. The budget that has been produced does not reflect the populace of our state. So first and foremost, that's not fair representation. Second of all, and I think for me, the most maddening aspect of all of this, when you look at education funding, the voters have spoken loud and clear, summer after summer, initiative after initiative. The priorities for them, for our voters in the state of Arizona, is to fund our public schools, fully fund our public schools, to stop the shenanigans, to stop the cuts, to stop the bleeding, and to produce a budget that prioritizes our education and our educators, and elevate the profession for what it needs to be in this state. For most of you who don't know me, I cut my teeth on citizens initiatives working for Save Our Schools. Was one of the first down in Tucson to start organizing to collect signatures to refer the voucher expansion to the ballot. And then the following year, when we knew that Prop 305 was going to be on the ballot, Save Our Schools hired me to be the regional lead for all of Southern Arizona. And if there was anything that was fantastic that came from that summer, well, both summers of 2017 and 2018, of talking with voters and knocking on doors and hitting the streets and speaking at town halls and events, dinner parties, house parties, is that the voters of Arizona have become quite savvy when it comes to tax dollars and tax policy as it relates to funding education, public education in this state. And the voters again and again have said, it is our priority that we take our public tax dollars and we keep them in our public schools. The fact that a district like Tucson Unified School District. My husband is a teacher. He's a middle school teacher within the district. And my oldest child graduated out of TUSD, and I still have 2 children in high school. And the fact that none of my children have received a fully funded education is very telling. And for me, it's something that has aggravated me. And in spite of that, we've got educators showing up day in, day out to teach and to work hard. And for that, I'm grateful. However, we are starting to have more positions to fill. There's less retention. And the fact that public tax dollars in the way of STOs and ESAs are being funneled to private schools, private religious schools, and homeschooling it's a shell game that's designed to get around our Constitution. And a district like Tucson Unified School District, which primarily serves Title I students, free and reduced lunch children, our district is going to take a significant hit. And guess what? This district is the second largest in the state of Arizona. That's a lot of jobs. It's a lot of families. And you want to talk about the local economy taking a hit? Let's continue to erode the foundations of our public school system. This is not forward thinking. It is not the state doing what it needs to do to promote the best education possible. What we have in the way of public schools the private schools can't even begin to compare the services that we are able to provide, the education that comes out of our classrooms, and the quality of the staff and personnel that show up day in, day out to work with our children. So for me, I find I've said it from day one. I find this eroding of our public school systems, I find it to be immoral. It is definitely unethical, and it is against the Arizona state constitution. And, for me, being powerless to even have a seat at the table to weigh in on the budget, quite honestly, is offensive. And I would love for more of our engaged people in the state of Arizona to demand that they have fair representation at the Capitol, because what's happening right now is not fair, and it is not representative of what the people in the state want. I appreciate your time. I certainly am open to answer questions, but I know we've got other speakers who want to speak, but thank you for given me an opportunity to be here and to participate in this town hall.
Thank you so much, Senator Hamilton. I really appreciate everything you said, but I especially like that you pointed out that our public schools offer so much. I think that gets lost in all of this, and it's so critical. So thank you. I'm gonna call on Dr. Trujillo to sort of piggyback on what you were saying and tell us about, the very special things that are happening in Tucson Unified, but also the ramifications of these massive ESA voucher expansions. Oh, Dr. Trujillo, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, almost 3 years into using Zoom, and I'm still dealing with the mute issue. First of all, Beth, thank you for giving us this opportunity here, and thank you to Save Our Schools for all your advocacy. First of all, a $5 billion surplus and a legislature, or at least half of it anyway, that's hell-bent on keeping Arizona number 49th in funding. It's shameful and it's embarrassing and it's a slap in the face. Secondly, a legislature that is, or half of it, that's hell-bent on passing a budget that is in no way reflective of half of the population of this state is also embarrassing, shameless, and it's unacceptable. And third, if that's not enough, a legislature that's supposed to be doing the business of the people, I'm talking about the Republican majority, spending an unacceptable amount of time, resources, and taxpayer money relitigating the 2020 election, only to have us here deep in June with no budget, is not only an act of negligence and embarrassment, it's incompetence, not just for educational funding, but for all the areas of the state that need to function and that need to run post June 30th. There is absolutely no reason to be here on June 7th with no budget. And that's beyond education. As far as ESSA, I'll drag that dead horse and just keep beating on it. I don't care how many times it keeps coming back. It is not the will of the people. It's not what the Arizona voters want. They spoke very clearly on Proposition 305, which Save Our Schools led a movement to defeat Proposition 305. Where the voters spoke very loudly, we want public school dollars in public schools. We do not want to be a part of an initiative or a funding proposal that siphons off public dollars for public school children and young people and routes them over to tuition-rich private schools and religious organizations only to fatten their coffers where they have less accountability. There is no way that can be received or perceived as anything less than a way to starve our cash-starved public schools into submission and extinction. Our private schools, or the private schools and these schools that are taking advantage of these STO dollars, they don't have boards. They don't have to administer the AZ merit like we do. They don't have to participate in the accountability structures that the rest of the state does, but yet they're going to be receiving these dollars. There is in no way you can tell me that that is fair and equal. And Proposition 305 spoke very loudly to what the will of Arizona voters is. And there's really no reason for it. With a huge budget surplus that we have, there's no reason that you can't move Arizona public school funding forward in a drastically better way than it has been.
Thank you so much, Dr. Trujillo. I think your words definitely always resonate with me and with our audience. So thank you for speaking the truth. I would love to hear from you and then from Burdetta, your perspective on how those funds would be better used. I mean, we've gotten some funding from the federal government in terms of ESSER funds. We're still desperately underfunded because our state has abdicated its duty. There's a lot of questions in the chat about, well, we got these one-time federal funds. Would that balance things out? But you and I know that, the hundreds of millions of dollars leaving our schools and private school vouchers wouldn't balance that. Can you explain that to the people who don't have to do budget spreadsheets like you?
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. Can you hear me? Am I off mute? Yes, okay. For one thing, let me just go back to what he said. When you talk about vouchers and you talk about public schools, another thing that happens is our private schools are taking our kids until after the ADM hits and knocks in, and then they'll send them back and say that their grades are, that they don't fit in with the kids. And then we get them back, but we don't get the funding. So we're getting double hit. They're taking away the funds in the beginning, and then we will get the kids back without funding. So we have to stretch our dollar even further. So that happens quite a bit. And we're working on that to try to fight that too, because that is a problem that public schools are having that is just ridiculous. And it's our state legislators is doing it to us every single time, because they won't look at the fact of how the difference between private and public schools are funded and what's going on. And it affects not only our students, it affects our teachers. The reason why we're in such a crisis, the ESSER funds, all this, the one-time funding, what we're having in our public schools, we're having a crisis on finding teachers that are staying because of everything that's happening with them. Teachers has been underneath they've been underneath the bullet. And it's always been like that, but it's gotten worse with COVID. And no one wants to go through that abuse. And what we can do with that funding is we can fund our teachers. We can give them better accommodations. We can give them better funding. Most teachers work in a district that they can't even afford to live near their schools because it's so expensive. Those are things that we can do. We're looking now to think about how can we have affordable housing for our teachers. One thing we can be doing, having affordable housing for teachers who are right on the front line with it, right? So these are things we can do. With the budget being as late as possible, it affects us. We have a shell of a budget going into our school year. We don't even know how much money we're going to get back or what we're going to get from the state. And that tells how much we can do with our schools, our funding for our teachers, our everything that we need to start the school year off. We're falling behind on that. Our school starts July 1. You know, even though our kids are not back, everything starts July 1. We're almost in the middle of June and we're under fire because parents and communities like, so you're not transparent enough about your budget. We have these budget conversations and we're saying, but it can continue. We have to wait to see. They're not fired up at the legislature. They're fired up at us as governing board members and districts and saying that we're not transparent. We're not telling where our money's going. Well, we can't tell where the money's going when we don't have the money to tell. So I'm just fed up, furious with our legislator. They haven't been helping us, you know, with this. Oh, the 51% is over at the Republicans and Democrats don't have it. This is ridiculous. Education is not partisan. They need to get that out of their system and understand that it's our kids that's being affected by it, our next generation. And they talk about there's no hope for the future, but there's no hope because there's no hope. We're not supporting our youth. We're not supporting the people who support the youth, our teachers, our principals, our schools. So yeah, I'm just a little bit mad. I'm at a school board conference right now. And all we're going to talk about things that we can't do because we have no funding for it. We have no protection. And we also have no one looking. I mean, yes, when we have 48% of it and the other 51% saying, no, you know, we need to do it. We need to make sure everybody is equal, but it's not equal when it comes to accountability. That's the part that gets me. Yeah, they want to be equal when it comes to funding. Well, if public schools get it, then private schools deserve it. We need vouchers for both, but they're not holding the private schools accountable for everything that public schools are. So yes, I am fired up. I am upset. Yeah, so you can, and I'm ready to fight.
Yeah, well, I know this year, a few months ago, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, New Mexico all passed massive teacher pay increases across the board. And they were able to declare that in the spring so that, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'm going to ask it as a question, but do you think that would help your school district if months ago you could have told your teachers that you were going to give them $5,000 to $10,000 more a year?
I'm going to say something out. Hell yes.
I know.
It's just like, I mean, we will sit and pay millions of dollars to watch someone play basketball, but we refuse to pay the people who are actually in control of our children's education. You know, it just baffles me that the first responders, teachers, firemen, we fight every day not to fund them. But when it comes to, if we want to pay $1 million to watch the basketball game, they make what, 10, 15, $20 million for 3 months? But we would refuse to pay that for our teachers to survive, just a surviving date. So
I see school board members chiming in the chat saying, us too, this is true. You're, urban, rural, suburban, every district
Yes.
I crunched the numbers. It would only cost, it sounds like a lot of money, but $300 million to give every teacher in the state $10,000 raise to keep teachers in the profession. And they have a $5.3 billion surplus. So I was going to ask Dr. Trujillo as well, and then I want to hear some parent and educator perspectives. So Dr. Trujillo, back to you. Do you feel, how would TUSD use this additional dollars if the state would just give it to you, and if they would stop trying to drag it for their pet projects? Oh, Dr. Trujillo, you're on mute. And I was on mute when I said that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely no question. Like Burdetta Hodge said, we would go right after teacher salaries and education support professionals. You know, it's not just about teacher salaries. You have an entire ecosystem around the learning experience of a child that the teacher counts on. They need a paraprofessional with a living wage. They need a counselor. They need a social worker. They need food services team members to provide a clean and safe place to eat. They need a monitor for school safety. They need a custodian for a clean learning space. And when you can't pay those folks anything more than the McDonald's down the street or the Walmart, you're going to start to chip away at that infrastructure. And all of a sudden, your teachers don't have the resources that they need to be successful. Even if you're paying them, you need to do both. Teacher salaries are embarrassingly low here in Arizona. It's sad, it's shameful. And even worse is what we pay our support staff and what we pay those education support professionals that serve as paraprofessionals, teachers assistants. That's number one. And I'll continue to drag the other dead horse out. You know, dead horse number one is ESSA. Guess what number two is? Capital funding. TUSD has $180 million in deferred maintenance needs in facilities across this 220 square mile district that are as old as Safford, 1925, ranging from Mary Bell McCorkle Academy from 2011. We have historic campuses that are, some of them almost 100 years old. And when you look at our needs for grounds and HVAC systems and plumbing and electrical upgrades and flooring and bathrooms, and that's not to mention our playing fields and our auditoriums and our parking lots, we have $180 million in need. $160 million have been taken from this district in capital cuts since 2010, and they have been slow walking the restoration of capital over the last several years. It's nowhere near what we need, but those are at the top of our list immediately. And you cannot provide a world-class educational experience for kids unless you have a highly qualified and a highly compensated teacher in the room, and you have that instructional infrastructure, that ecosystem, that instructional ecosystem around that teacher so they can be successful. You got to do both.
That's right. All right. I'm going to turn it over to hear some parent and educator perspectives. So we have two wonderful folks on the call who are both educators and parents. I've got Patrick Brown and Raquel Mamani. Raquel, I think I'm going to go to you first. Let me get my technology going. All right. So I know you have a very unique experience, and I know that you're always willing to share. So we hear a lot about school choice, and you know, you have your own unique perspective on whether it's actually school choice and whether it's beneficial for kids or maybe not.
Well, yes, thank you, Beth, so much. And, you know, that's one of the things that got me going in 2017 when I started to, you know, when I have twins that are going to be in high school, and they're going to be freshmen in high school, and my children have never been in a fully funded school. And back in 2017, I as a teacher, I thought I knew everything about education. And I thought, well, school choice is great, right? Everyone gets to choose. And so then when I had my kids going to kindergarten, I live in Central Phoenix, surrounded by private schools. The closest school to our house was a private school that we could walk to. I had no idea what a voucher was back in that day. And I thought, okay, I'm making the choice to go private school. We were able to pay for it. And that's where I learned that it was a false narrative, that actually we chose the school, but the school did not choose us. So my twins were tested at 4 years old, a little computer test, and they had not ever been in front of screens at that point. And they gladly, they came back and said, we will happily take your daughter, but none. Thank you so much. Have a great day. It's not you, it's us. And was appalled and furious. And later on, we found out that my son does have a learning disability, which is very well taken care of at our public school. And since that day, I have decided to go ahead and talk about this false narrative of school choice. During an election year, everybody loves to talk about it's the parent's choice and the parents get the right to choose, but they don't tell you that it's not the parent that gets to choose, it's the school that gets to choose, it's the school's choice. And they don't tell you a bunch of the other things like, they only pay for $5,000 of it and who's gonna pay the difference. And so ever since that day, I had decided to go ahead and talk to our communities and talk about what's going on, because along with being now living in Central Phoenix and having access to these fabulous schools, I live in, surrounded by a great school district. I also think of my hometown, the border towns, the small rural towns like Nogales, Arizona, where we don't have these choice academies. We don't have these private schools to send our students to. They are left in their old schools that need, that are, like Dr. Trujillo mentioned, have millions of dollars in deferred maintenance. And so, when I learned about what the Constitution says, I want that to be true. From Nogales to Ajo to Y to, every single part, Eloy, and that is not happening. And so ever since then, I have decided to go ahead and educate myself and spread the word and continue to beat the dead horse. And so, I was joking earlier about my hairdresser is kept in business by the AZ legislature because the gray hair keeps coming, because it's so maddening to see it over and over again, and them hide behind the school choice false narrative. And so as that's my mom's side. And then I'm a teacher as well. I decided to go in as a substitute, and people like, you're choosing to be a sub? Absolutely, I'm choosing to be a sub, because on any given day, school in Central Phoenix, we have 8 rotations. That means 8 teachers are losing, 5, 6 teachers are losing their prep every single day on top of me being in there. And so this year I talked to at least 10 or 15 teachers that are leaving our middle school. They do not know where they're going. Some of them are going to other states. Some of them are saying, I'm just not going to be a teacher anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. And so every story that I hear breaks my heart, and it infuriates me a little bit more. And so, that's why I continue to do what I do and will not stop, because the attacks on on educators and on our kids are not stopping. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you so much, Raquel. Raquel and I have been down. We've seen how predatory it is down at the Capitol, and in meetings with lawmakers, we all, like at Save Our Schools and other advocates, have asked time and time again, can we have protections for students with special needs? Can they have their IDEA federal rights for students with disabilities? Can you pass laws that would prevent discrimination based on things like race and gender and sexual orientation? And the answer is always no. There's a refusal to regulate anything about private schools. And then when you go to them and you say, well, if you refuse to regulate them in any way, shape, or form, why are you giving them public dollars? They never have an answer. And I think that speaks volumes. And if we want to protect our kids, all of our kids, then we need to make sure that they are in safe, well-funded public schools. I want to make sure to hear from Patrick. Patrick, you are a parent who's seen a lot of this go down. I know that some of the privatizers have been crawling in your neighborhood. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Beth, thank you for bringing me on with this great group. I live in South Phoenix. I'm a parent of two great boys. I got a middle schooler, I got a 5th grader, and I've been on the ground seeing this whole thing. And I think just to really kind of put it in perspective, because we've talked a lot about the budget, the state legislature. Something my economics professor way back in grad school said that has always resonated with me is that you can always tell the values of society based on what their budget looks like. And when we look at, the budget or lack of a budget or the budget priorities that we're seeing, it's basically saying that, the vast majority of our population and our kids don't matter. And the thing is, like, this whole thing with the school vouchers, it's really, I mean, it's a shell game, it's a bait and switch. And what's really upsetting is in communities like mine, they're trying to create a problem and then utilize folks' desperation to buy into it. The thing is, like, I'm old enough to remember when education in Arizona was well funded, where, when I was a kid, when I was going to school, we had everything. Our teachers weren't working like 2 or 3 side hustles just to make it. They were focused on it. They were coaching. We have what we need. What my kids are experiencing is, it's fundraisers for everything. It's, it's all these other things that should just be part of the school experience. And what's really, really upsetting about, the voucher thing, and I definitely want to speak to this, is that the reality is the private schools, 2 things. We've already said there's no accountability. They basically can do what they want to do. So if a child has a learning disability, if a child has, any kind of, special need or anything of that nature, or that child doesn't fit into the culture that school wishes to promote or to, have, then what can a parent do? And so the thing is that's one issue. When we look at the cost of a private school, not many parents aren't, financially in a position to pay these tuition. And what we're getting from those, from the vouchers often isn't enough. And going back to, what Burdetta said about, they'll take the kids, they'll take them as far as that money will go. And then when that money runs out, the parent can't get a scholarship or the parent can't find the rest of the money, then it's back to the public school, where then that budget, that funding is gone. And that's not right. It's not equitable. It's really just not fair. Now, here's my thing. I will, I want to be, fair to all parents. If someone wants to send their child to a private school, cool. Do what you think is best for your child. However, the thing is, like, that is a decision that someone's making, and thus they should be able to fund it themselves, not get public tax money, and we lose the accountability as a public to hold those schools accountable for who they enroll and how they operate. And I think that's at the core of what's wrong with these vouchers. And looking at a community like mine, what it's doing is it's undermining public education. Every, that ADM where a kid, gets a voucher, leaves that system, that starves that school. And then what's really insulting is many of the folks down in the state legislature have the audacity to then blame hardworking teachers. I was a classroom teacher. I was an administrator. It is not the teachers, okay? They're blaming the teachers. They're blaming all these things, when in reality, what it is that they're starving the schools. If I'm running a race, if I'm a track athlete and you don't feed me, and I get to my track meet and I haven't eaten, I don't have the fuel to do that race, I'm going to underperform. And so when you have buildings that, are falling apart, when you have teachers who are having to make the decision of doing the job that they love, working with the kids that they care about, or having to take care of their own family and their own futures, when you have schools not able to keep up with the technology needs that kids have, are going to need to be to move on to bigger and better things, then the reality is that the schools are going to suffer. And so really, as a parent and, as a voter and as a fierce education activist, when it comes to these issues, it's really simple. It's, fund our schools. We have the money. This is not a rainy day. It's not raining. We're in a flood. Okay. And the fact of the matter is that all these excuses, and that's what they are, they're excuses to ultimately penalize, hurt our public education system for reasons that frankly, don't hold water with me, but it's like I said, just creating this social division. I'm gonna, like I said, folks at home that are watching this, myself, I'm a product of public education. K-12, university, grad school, public education. And the thing is, like, it terrifies me that so many kids are in Arizona are not going to have that opportunity, or they're going to have, you know, a horrible, you know, educational experience simply because of greed, because of ignorance, and because, you know, this idea that, you know, your quality of life and your quality of education is based on your zip code and how much money your parents have in the bank account.
All right, well, I speak for everyone in saying that this panel should just run the state, and let's just put Patrick and all of y'all in charge, and we'll just go from there. Deal?
Deal.
Oh, man,
Beth, I gotta jump off, but can I say one thing before I leave?
you bet.
I'm gonna say this. We want to change the policy, we have to change the politicians. We have to go out there, know who you're representing, go beyond just the D and the R, go and research, find out what they stand for. And don't just stop at the legislators, because there is bad governing board members out there who are just as bad as, as not wanting to fund. We have governing board members who have investments in private schools that are sitting on public schools. So all I'm saying is, get out there, learn who the people are who are running. When you find someone that you stand behind, well, put your time and talent and treasure behind that person, because that's what we need. We're not going to be able to change this until we can change the politicians. I'm sorry. The policy is never going to change until the politics change. And that's what we need to be. So I bid you, I'm so sorry I can't stay longer, but I'm at a conference and they've been texting me, telling me I have to go. So thank you so much for.
Thank you, Burdetta. We'll see you soon.
See you
All
soon.
right. Well, I want to give everybody kind of a last word, and respect everybody else on this live chat. I'm putting a few things in the chat and we'll put them up on Facebook. We have endorsements. I hear a lot of talk in this, you know, webinar chat about electing new folks. That is obviously, we need to change the balance of power to folks who actually care about and will prioritize public education and stop with this privatization nonsense, stop defunding our schools. And Burdetta's right. We have school board candidates, we have legislative candidates. Both sides matter. The whole ballot matters. We have the opportunity to elect a new governor this year. We have a lot of work to do. So please join us and volunteer. We are phone banking, we're writing postcards, and most importantly, we are canvassing. That means knocking doors. It sounds scary, I know, but I'm weird. I love it. I love talking to voters, and they're really hungry for this information. They want to know who the great candidates are, and they have incredible support for public education. And because of this network and all of the work done by education advocates over the last 5 years, they understand the needs. They understand we have to vote for new people. They just want you to tell them who the good people are. So I promise, just join us and you can make a difference. Everything today underscored the tremendous need for real solutions from the state legislature around funding Arizona schools, ending child poverty, stopping gun violence. There are so many solutions that need to be brought forth for our children and for our future. We are tired of hearing, you know, myopic conversations around funneling more and more taxpayer dollars to private schools. So I'm going to do one more last round of quick questions for each of you. I'm going to start with you, Senator Hamilton. I would like to know, are people asking for vouchers? Are you getting a ton of emails and calls clamoring for more vouchers, or are people asking for more funding for their public schools?
That's no, the same is true as when I was, out there stumping for 305, when I was out there collecting signatures, as we have had summer after summer of Invest in Ed, people want a fully funded public school system. Folks are tired of this private school push, privatizing everything. I can tell you, the narrative, real quickly, the narrative used to be, oh, it's the retired people. They don't want to pay more taxes. Well, they don't care about our schools. That's not true. In my experience, that is not true. In Tucson, we have had so many people that are transplants from the Midwest, and those have been some of the strongest and most vocal about getting out the word about what's happening in our public schools. They remember the days of a strong public school system. They scratch their heads and say, I don't understand what's going on in Arizona with public education. The will of the people is there. We just now need the political will. And I think Ms. Hodges hit it right, hit the nail on the head. We cannot change the policy until we change the politicians. And, those of us who are in the trenches and putting up the roadblocks, we're fighting the fight. We sure could use some help. So whoever you can send our way that is going to be pro public education, who understands that meritocracy does no community any good, send them our way and let's get them elected. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. All right, let's see, Dr. Trujillo, back to you. Any last words about this or any other legislation? I know we have talked a lot about these school takeover bills, and there's worry that they will rear their ugly heads again in this budget. What are you hearing or thinking?
Well, the school takeover bills, I think that's if you have a gun to one side of your head, which is ESSA, the other proverbial gun to the head of the public education structure is the school takeover bills, which is effectively what I call the kill shot. And I don't think that the pressure is going to stop. I think that the Republican side of the House and the Senate have made it very clear that our public school system to them is nothing more than a tax burden. And the sooner that it can be extinguished, the better it's going to be for the profit margins of the privatizers to come in and pick up the pieces. And I think that the school takeover bills, those have absolutely nothing to do with student achievement. They have absolutely nothing to do with providing a world-class educational experience for kids. It's all about closing down impoverished school districts and impoverished schools that serve high needs populations as quickly as possible so we can move the privatizers in. So thankfully, through the efforts of Save Our Schools and a lot of other amazing advocates, some of those attack bills have been stopped in their tracks this session. But guess what? The budget session, the budget talks are still alive and well, and they're going to rear their ugly heads again. So I would just caution everybody on the call. I know we were talking a lot about ESSA today, but those school takeover bills, those are hostile and those are threats to our public schools, and we've got to try to stop them at every turn.
Absolutely. All right, last two, I want to hear from Patrick and Raquel. What would you tell other educators and parents about how do we turn this ship around? How do you recommend getting involved?
Yeah, here's the reality. Superman is not going to fly in and save us. There is not a magical Norse hammer that you can pick up and smash us all away. It's going to take hard work. It's going to take us. It's going to take the people, the folks impacted, the parents, the teachers, everybody to, talk about these issues. Don't shy away from this stuff. Talk to your neighbor, talk to, your uncle who doesn't have kids, talk to whomever, but also more importantly, get to know the bottom of the ticket. These school board members, there are a lot of really fierce pro-education folks that are running for school board. You may not see, like I said, it's not like running for U.S. Senate or anything like that with all the commercials. They're out there, they're knocking on doors, they're in your community, they're your neighbors. Support these people, get to know them, help get them elected. We talked about state legislature. Ask your state legislators these tough questions. Okay, it's too late to worry about this stuff now. This session, it's happening. We can't worry. We can't say, oh well, what are we going to do? What we're going to do? We have the opportunity right now to address these issues, and it's going to take involvement. And this big thing is just be the change you want to see. If you don't believe that you're the school board person running is the right person for the job, then guess what? Do it. Run for school board or support the people who are running, who are the right people for the job. Same thing for the state legislature. the thing is when I look at, what's happening, what's been happening, it's not a flaw, it's a feature. And what Superintendent Trujillo said is 100% accurate in the fact that communities like mine, I love my community, I love South Phoenix, and communities like mine, they're trying to turn us into a profit margin. They want to shut down our schools, they want to take them over, and they want to profit off of providing the weakest, poorest educational experience for our kids. And that's not okay. And the thing is, if you don't live in a community like South Phoenix, the thing is, it's going to come to everybody, because where our future doctors, our future lawyers, our future everything, where are they coming from? They're coming from these public schools. And so the thing is, if we have a weak public education and we're privatizing and we're doing the bare minimum, then yeah, our society is going to be in a bad space. So the thing is, we got to do the work. Thank you.
And I was just going to jump in and say, I think they're banking on the fact that we will give up and get tired. I get asked so many times, Raquel, why do you keep going? Why do you do what you do when, you still haven't saved the schools, Raquel? I get teased from some of my hometown friends, and I say, that's what they're banking on, so we need more people to join us. If you just do one thing, make a phone call, join a phone bank, write that email. So yes, every little bit makes a difference, and joining somebody, an organization like Save Our Schools that give you all of the tools that you need have really allowed me to rest when I need to rest, because I know that there are new people joining us. So tonight, if you can do something, is join our community action teams, and don't feel like, oh, it's never going to make a difference, because that is what they are banking on. And so we will not give up, and we will not relent, and we need everyone to join us for any bit that they can do. Every action counts. So that's what I keep telling everyone that I know.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it at that. I'm so, so grateful to every single person who joined us tonight, and to everybody on our panel who gave such eloquent remarks. We appreciate you from the bottom of our hearts. I know it is exhausting to keep fighting for public education. We need to give one final push to get the right people in office so that we don't have to fight so darn hard for what really should be the bare minimum, which is funding our schools. So let's fight the good fight until November. Let's get amazing people in office. And, if you can reach out to your lawmakers right now and prevent this horrific universal voucher expansion and try and encourage them to do the right thing this session, that will help our kids a lot in the meantime. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please share this live so that all of your friends know what's going on down at the legislature, and we will keep you posted. So please stay tuned on Facebook and Twitter and email for more budget negotiations. We will be live probably back here in the next week or so, and maybe down at the Capitol. So stay tuned. Thanks, everyone.